the Jesus Revelation Symphony. This is a glimpse into the magnificent and beautiful life Jesus lived on our planet. Of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it. Let your spirit soar as you hear Jesus' Revelation Symphony revealed anew through epical revelation, affirming that you are a son or daughter of God, our Father in heaven, and that all mortals are brothers and sisters. Through our becoming one with our divine spirits, we will be in harmony with each other, and through the fruits of the Spirit we bear, we can recreate the beautiful music of Jesus' symphony in our life in the 21st century. And so I give you this new commandment, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. And by this will all men know that you are my disciples, if you thus love one another. To share my love means that you have shared in my service. The affectionate dedication of the human will to the doing of the Father's will is man's choicest gift to God. And he who surrenders to the will of my Father shall abide forever and receive eternal life. Never forget, there is only one adventure which is more satisfying and thrilling than the attempt to discover the will of the living God, and that is the supreme experience of honestly trying to do that divine will. Let your religion become the fact of real experience, which testifies that God has found you, idealized, ennobled, and spiritualized you, and that you have enlisted in the eternal adventure of finding the God who has thus found and sonshiped you. The Father has sent his Spirit to indwell your human mind. They bring with them the model career, the ideal lives as determined and foreordained by the Father. Survival is a gift of God which must be desired by the mortals of time. Prayer is the breath of the soul and should lead you to be persistent in your attempt to ascertain the Father's will. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door of salvation will be opened. Persist in praying, not to win favor with God, but to change your earth attitude and to enlarge your soul capacity for spirit receptivity. Prayer elevates man because it is a technique of progressing by the utilization of the ascending spiritual currents of the universe. Even when the air currents are ascending, no bird can soar except by outstretched wings. Jesus taught that when they had made their prayers to the Father, they should remain for a time in silent receptivity to afford the indwelling Spirit the better opportunity to speak to the listening soul. God answers man's prayer by giving him an increased revelation of truth, an enhanced appreciation of beauty, and an augmented concept of goodness. It is the most potent spiritual growth stimulus. Pray always, and have faith, living faith. Salvation is the free gift of God, but those who are born of the Spirit will immediately begin to show forth the fruits of the Spirit in loving service to their fellow mortals. Someday, The gospel of the kingdom will be better understood when it is presented in terms expressive of the family relationship, the teaching of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, sonship with God. Then the Master discoursed at some length on the earthly family as an illustration of the heavenly family. Love of family would invariably manifest itself in unselfish and loving social service. Marriage with children and consequent family life is stimulative of the highest potentials of human nature and simultaneously provides the ideal avenue for the expression of these quickened attributes of mortal personality. The disciples early learned that the Master had a profound respect and sympathetic regard for every human being he met, and they were tremendously impressed by this uniform and unvarying consideration which he so consistently gave to all sorts of men, women, and children. He would pause in the midst of a profound discourse that he might go out in the road to speak good cheer to a passing woman laden with her burden of body and soul. He would interrupt a serious conference with his apostles to fraternize with an intruding child. Nothing ever seemed so important to Jesus as the individual human who chanced to be in his immediate presence. He was master and teacher, but he was more. He was also a friend and a neighbor, an understanding comrade. Though Jesus' public teaching mainly consisted in parables and short discourses, he invariably taught his apostles by questions and answers. He would always pause to answer sincere questions during his later public discourses. The apostles were at first shocked by, but early became accustomed to Jesus' treatment of women. He made it very clear to them that women were to be accorded equal rights with men in the kingdom. Of all the daring things which Jesus did in connection with his earth career, the most amazing was his sudden announcement on the evening of January 16th, 29 A.D., "On the morrow we will set apart 10 women for the ministering work of the kingdom." Jesus earlier had requested David Zebedee to dispatch messengers calling to Bethsaida 10 devout women who had served in the administration of the former encampment and the tented infirmary. These women had all listened to the instruction given the young evangelists, but it had never occurred to either themselves or their teachers that Jesus would dare to commission women to teach the gospel of the kingdom and minister to the sick. It was at Magdala that the women first demonstrated their usefulness and vindicated the wisdom of their children. Andrew had imposed rather strict rules upon his associates about doing personal work with women, especially with those of questionable character. When the party entered Magdala, these 10 women evangelists were free to enter the evil resorts and preach the glad tidings directly to all their inmates. And when visiting the sick, these women were able to draw very close in their ministry to their afflicted sisters. As a result of the ministry of these 10 women, afterward known as the 12 women, Mary Magdalene was won for the kingdom. Through a succession of misfortunes, this woman had found herself in one of the nefarious resorts of Magdala. It was Martha and Rachel who made plain to Mary that the doors of the kingdom were open to even such as she. Mary believed the good news and was baptized by Peter the next day. Mary Magdalene became the most effective teacher of the gospel among this group of 12 women evangelists. She was set apart for such service, together with Rebecca, at Jotapata about 4 weeks subsequent to her conversion. This original group of 12 women soon trained a larger corps of 50 women in the work of home visitation and in the art of ministering to the sick and the afflicted. Perpetua, Simon Peter's wife, became a member of this new division of the Women's Corps and was entrusted with the leadership of the enlarged women's work under Abner. This new Women's Corps also had as members the wives of Philip and Matthew and the mother of James and John. In a day when women were not even allowed on the main floor of the synagogue, being confined to the women's gallery, and in the face of rabbinic teachings which declared that it was better that the words of the law should be burned than delivered to women, it was most astounding in that day to behold them being recognized as authorized teachers of the new gospel of the kingdom. The charge which Jesus gave these 10 women as he set them apart for gospel teaching and ministry was the Emancipation Proclamation, which set free all women and for all time. No more was man to look upon woman as his spiritual inferior. The whole country was stirred up by this proceeding, the enemies of Jesus making great capital out of this move, but everywhere the women believers in the good news stood staunchly behind their chosen sisters and voiced no uncertain approval of this tardy acknowledgement of women's place in religious work. And this liberation of women, giving them due recognition, was practiced by the apostles immediately after the Master's departure, albeit they fell back to the olden customs in subsequent generations.